Good morning, I'm Father X. Many dads in a custody battle think Child Protective Services only gets involved when something serious happens to your kids. But in a custody case, one small accident, one twisted story from the mom, and suddenly you're treated like a danger to your own child. Everyone is looking at you while mom's behavior gets ignored. In this episode, I'll show you how moms can manipulate CPS, and I'll show you counter maneuvers to make this tactic backfire on the mom. And I'll share 4 real-life stories so you can see how this works. And hang tight, because the third story is one of my most unforgettable CPS stories, because it clearly revealed the bias of CPS. Let's get to it. Story number 1, the emergency room tactic. During the middle of my 3-year custody trial, Child Protective Services got involved again when my son was about 2 years old. My parenting time was Friday at 6 p.m. until Sunday at 3 p.m. One Saturday, my son fell in the park and hit his front teeth on a cement block. He was bleeding a little, so I washed his mouth and soothed him. On Sunday morning, he was eating fine with no signs of pain and smiling and happy. So I didn't think more about it. It didn't occur to me to tell his mom or write it in our shared notebook about his care. Honestly, by Sunday afternoons, I was more focused on the fact our time together was ending and depressed he had to leave, and many of you know that overwhelming feeling. I dropped him off with his mom Sunday at 3 p.m. That evening, his mom brushed his teeth, and he started bleeding. She probably opened a wound behind his front teeth, and she didn't know he fell down Saturday. So, she took him to the emergency room Sunday night, without first asking me if anything happened. Basically, everything turned out fine with my son at the ER. But, I'm sure his mom lied to the ER staff, telling them I was abusive or something, because that visit triggered a CPS investigation. The doctors are mandatory reporters. Normally, a tiny injury like this would not lead to a CPS call, but in a custody case, false accusations of abuse can turn a small thing into a big event. That CPS case went nowhere, but the lesson was clear. A parent can weaponize an ER visit to create a fake crisis during a custody battle. Also, it was partly my fault for not telling her about our son's fall. A couple of days later, I emailed her to apologize for not telling her. As a side note, my son sometimes came back from her home with scrapes and cuts, and she never told me what happened. But I never ran to the ER because you're not supposed to use your child like that. For her, going to the ER, claiming there's a crisis with dad's parenting, that was a power move. And remember, she might have gone to the ER simply because it was Sunday night and every other doctor's office was closed. If that happens to you, explain that there was no real emergency. It was just the only place open. Do you see how fast something small can blow up? In this case, it fizzled out, but you may not be so lucky. Before we dive deeper, let me share something important. I took all the strategies I'm teaching and turned them into a full educational series, complete with my charts, scripts, best interest factor breakdowns, and a workbook that helps you prepare your testimony like a pro. These are the strategies that helped me get primary custody of my son. If you want to prepare faster and fight smarter, go to fatherx.lemonsqueezy.com and get the guides, all for less than the cost of 1 hour with a lawyer. These guides will save you time, money, and mistakes you can't afford to make. Story number 2, triggering mandatory reporters. During our 3-year custody trial, the mother started dating a man 2 hours away in another state. She was unemployed and took our infant son to visit him for days at a time. During one trip, she took our son to a new pediatrician there. She told this new doctor that I had a history of domestic violence towards people in the home, which I know was a lie, but clueless third parties don't know. How did I find out what she told that pediatrician? I requested certified copies of my son's medical records directly from that doctor's office, something you should always do. Certified copies are more likely to be admissible in court, depending on your state laws. When I read these records, I saw how the mother fooled a gullible new doctor who didn't know the real story. First, she lied to the doctor about me being abusive. Second, she conveniently left out her own history of violence, the police reports I filed against her, and the restraining order I got against her. That's how she tricked this gullible doctor and triggered another Child Protective Services case. Also, in the medical report, the mother claimed our son had bruises and feared that I caused them. But the pediatrician's notes stated our son had no bruises, so that contradicted the mother's false claims. But just because the mother claimed she was worried about potential abuse by the father, the doctor, a mandatory reporter, called CPS in that state. CPS started an investigation, and it was transferred to our home state. Our CPS had to investigate again, even though they had already investigated our case, and our custody case was pending in court to determine who the real abuser was. I discussed that in the prior episode 14A, but now the mother got CPS involved again. This tactic has multiple purposes. It puts you on the defensive. It risks a biased, incompetent CPS worker getting it all wrong and writing a report against you. There's little downside for the mother making false allegations. And sometimes a dad can have his parenting time suspended if there's a CPS investigation against him. How do you counter these moves? Because you can't just lay down and take it. First, prove the allegations are false, like I showed you in episodes 11D and 11L. If they're false, then it means she was manipulating the doctor, CPS, and the judge. Second, appellate courts have ruled that it's not in the child's best interests to live primarily with a parent who manipulates the legal system with false allegations. Your lower court judge might ignore the lies, but the higher courts don't, and neither did I. Yes, the false allegations were stressful, but each lie showed her pattern of manipulation. So every false allegation that I could disprove was like a nail in the coffin of her custody case. In my final 80-page written closing arguments, I listed every lie and every act of domestic violence she committed. When I laid out this pattern clearly, it told a story the judge couldn't ignore. How the mother manipulated CPS and the legal system, while she was the exclusive perpetrator of domestic violence. CPS story number 3. Our first male CPS worker, gullible. Around the middle of my 3-year custody trial, another Child Protective Services worker came to my home, our first male CPS worker. This story is unforgettable because his first words to me were, "I already talked to the mom. She told me this is a domestic violence case. You were arrested, and she now has primary custody. So I understand the background here." That's how he started. Before hearing a single word from me, he just believed her story. I quickly saw how gullible he was and how easily she manipulated him. This is a major lesson for you. In the real world, there are 4 scenarios of domestic abuse. First, women can be victims of abuse. Second, men can be victims. Third, there can be mutual abuse. And fourth, one of them might be lying about being abused, just to get an advantage in a divorce or custody case. Any normal person knows you have to figure out the facts before making the conclusion. But many CPS workers and family court practitioners are really dumb and are brainwashed into thinking that only the woman can be a victim and only the dad can be the abuser. Many don't realize dads can be the victim or the mom might be lying. Sadly, it's your job to teach your CPS worker this basic concept. Be prepared to teach this basic concept again and again to every new CPS or family court person you meet in your custody battle, because their lazy thinking is the heart and soul of family court. So with this new CPS guy, I corrected him and said, "No, you don't know the story at all. I was the victim of her domestic violence. She filed a false police report. The criminal charges were dropped when I showed the district attorney that the mother was lying. The judge gave her temporary custody without hearing any real testimony or evidence. Every time your CPS coworkers get involved, they get the story wrong in their reports to the judge. They cover up the mom's violent behavior so the judge never sees reality, and that leads to bad custody decisions for our son. Then I gave this CPS guy an example of another CPS mistake, which leads us to another CPS story within this story. I shared with him that months earlier, I told a CPS worker, a young woman in her 20s, to talk to the mother's former roommate. This roommate was a woman who lived with the mother right before the mother and I moved in together. The mother tried to physically assault this roommate. The roommate was a key witness who could confirm the mother's violent history. But that CPS worker told me, "That's in the past. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what's happening now." Can you believe that? That's the absurd way they filter things in their heads. In reality, a violent history is crucial when this case is about domestic abuse. But she didn't interview the roommate, never reported it to the judge, and just swept it under the rug. If you watched my last episode, 14A, you may remember that I got certified domestic violence incident reports from two of the mother's past homes with her ex-boyfriend and her ex-husband. CPS never found them, but I did. I had those ready for this CPS guy. So I told this new CPS guy that CPS keeps hiding important facts. I handed him those police reports showing the mother's past violence with her ex-husband and her ex-boyfriend. I told him, the judge needs to see these to learn who the mother really is. CPS can't keep hiding information from the judge. To his credit, he put those police reports in his report to the judge. But in court, at the next monthly 15-minute appearance, the judge didn't mention the report. We don't even know if she even read it. The judge said nothing about the mother's violent past. It was like the report disappeared into thin air. The mother's past violence was ignored until I brought it up myself in my trial testimony about a year later. With CPS and the judge, if you don't speak up, they'll never hear the truth. You have to correct them, clearly, directly, and with evidence, because they won't do the work for you. If the strategy of CPS and the judge is to hide from the facts, then your strategy is to block them from hiding. I never stopped forcing the truth onto my judge. There's another key lesson from this story. After CPS filed that report showing the mother's history of domestic incidents, no one ever called CPS on our case again. I think the mother realized it could backfire, that her own bad behavior could be exposed by CPS. So the lesson is, if you can get CPS to include the mother's bad behavior in their reports, the mom will stop trying to get CPS involved. So next, we'll run through some key strategies for you. But first, thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends who are in a similar situation. Please support this channel so I can make more videos. You can donate via my YouTube channel's About page using PayPal or Venmo. So now let's talk about some more lessons and strategies. CPS workers, having one versus many. In my case, we had a new CPS person for every new investigation, so I met many of them. But some of you might have one person dedicated to your entire case. There are pros and cons to each scenario. For example, if you only have one CPS worker, the benefit might be that over time they can learn the actual facts of your case. The negative is that if they're dumb, then you're stuck with a dumb person providing wrong information to your judge. If you have many CPS workers in your case, the benefit is that you might get one smart CPS worker out of every 5. And hopefully that one can undo the damage made by the other 4. The negative is that each new person is likely to assume mom must be good and dad must be bad. So you have to teach every new CPS worker the actual facts and history of your case, again and again. So they don't get lazy and just use stereotypes instead of the facts. And it's hard for you to be successful 100% of the time. Key strategy. Widen the CPS investigation. CPS often only focuses on the one incident they're asked to investigate. Usually it's, there might be something wrong with the father, investigate him. But when this happens, if the real danger is the mother, then a limited CPS investigation ignores the mother's issues and keeps everybody's eyes on the dad. It puts you on the defensive while she hides in the background. Don't let CPS only focus on you and this one false allegations. Disprove the false allegations, obviously, but then also try to expand the scope to include what a great dad you are and how well you take care of your kids. You want CPS to see you as a good dad. That's really important, so make that happen. And if the mom is unfit to parent, you should also try to expand their investigation to make them report the total picture of the mother's violence, anger, mental health, parental alienation, or whatever the real issue is. The mom does not want CPS reports showing what a good dad you are or how she's unfit, so she'll stop calling CPS when she sees this plan backfire. If she doesn't stop calling CPS, then show that pattern. Every time CPS comes back, remind them again and again of every single time the mother started a false accusation with CPS. Force CPS to recognize that pattern because they may not see it on their own. Be aware. Many CPS workers wrongly think that when the parents go to court, there's deep and intelligent conversation in front of the judge, and the judge knows all the facts of your case. But you and I know what really happens. 15-minute appearances that are speed contests. The judge doesn't hear testimony or see evidence, not until a real trial happens much later. These appearances are just quick and shallow meetings. So tell the CPS worker the reality. The judge hasn't seen the full set of facts. These other new facts are relevant, and CPS has to show them to the judge for the best interests of the child. Even if they're facts you already put in your petitions, but the judge has ignored them, get CPS to include them in their reports anyway, to push it into the judge's face. Why is this a key strategy? First, it's a way to get testimony and evidence in front of the judge. Basically, the mom wanted the judge to get a CPS report about what a negligent dad you are, but instead, the judge gets a report about what a good dad you are and that there are issues with the mom. Second, it discourages false CPS calls. If CPS reports show you as a good dad, or they start raising issues about mom, then she won't want CPS involved. And you don't want CPS involved in your case either, unless, of course, they're already singing your praises and recommending you have custody. Strategies. Her strategy versus my strategy. The mother's strategy in my case was simple. Get clueless doctors, CPS, and the judge to believe I was abusive so she could get custody. It's the silver bullet strategy. Her tactic was simple. Get gullible professionals to believe her lies, repeat them in a report, and use that report in court. For me, my strategy was to expose her violence and expose how she's lying about my violence. When I saw that third parties provided no real evidence, didn't interview me, or had no real analysis behind their conclusions, and they just blindly believed her story, it was easy to expose that as lazy and biased work. If you face that too, call it out. In court, you can say, "They never spoke to me. They just repeated her claims without checking anything. That's not analysis. That's negligence." In the end, it's a battle of persistence. Her ability to lie plus CPS's laziness and gullibility versus your determination to get facts into the record. You have to stand up for yourself and be assertive with these clueless third parties. If you don't, then they'll just treat your case like another status quo case. They'll ignore and steamroll the dad, and they'll just rubber stamp whatever the mother wants. You have to break their standard process. These might be the darkest days of your life. They were for me. I'm making these educational videos to help you navigate this nightmare. If you subscribe, you can get updates when I post more videos. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, you got this.